So the rabbi instructed me to begin on in the Kuntas page Lamed Vav. That's in the paragraph begins Al Pi Abdom Hazu. Yeah, so the Maamre begins with Yisro's arrival and asks a bunch of diukim regarding the nature and the reason for Yisro's arrival and how all of that is a hachana specifically to Matan Torah. And the Rebbe begins by continuing the conversation, continuing the discussion of previous Mamarim, the Hemshech, the third and Hemshech, in which the Nekuda is this big revolutionary idea of Tzimtzum, Shlefnei Tzimtzum edition. Of course, we're not going to rehash the whole thing now. We already had many shiurim on that, but the Nekuda is basically that for the production of anything, even the highest of levels requires a Tzimtzum. So not just from transcendence, from Oil and Soif to get to Gvul, you have to go through a Tzimtzum. That's the classic Tzimtzum edition, to go from Oil and Soif to Gvul. But even the very notion of Oil and Soif itself requires a Tzimtzum. As soon as you go to anything at all, when you're coming from the very essence of Hashem himself, Atzma Samahos, which has no definition beyond any possible definition, even the definitions of transcendence and Bligvul. So to go from that Atzmos that we're calling, the essence of Hashem, to go to anything, even the greatest, highest level of transcendence, requires that Tzimtzum. This is the Tzimtzum Shelefnei Tzimtzum edition. Okay, so continue the Rabbi based on this introduction. Shachidush the Matan Torah. That what's revealed at Matan Torah, what's revealed here is the very essence of Hashem. He who dwells in darkness, his darkness is his hiding place, darkness is his dwelling. That is the self of Hashem that's beyond even ours. So it's and that's what's being revealed. That's what's being manifested in Matan Torah. Now we can understand why, as a preparation for the giving of the Torah, we required Yisro coming on board. Okay, I'm going to translate the words of the next paragraph and then explain it maybe a bit slow, because I think there might be more than one way to understand it, and we'll translate it as literally as I can, and then as straightforward as I can, and maybe explain it.
Okay.
Derech Efsher. Continue Ksiv, because the pasuk says, Pasuk says, says, I see a virtue and a value of wisdom over foolishness, like the value of light from darkness. And Chassidus asked the basic question. Tanya already addresses this question. And the Zohar really addresses this question, actually, to the Tanya quotes, which is, what's the greatest Gaval to the pasuk? Shlomo discovered something amazing, that there's a virtue of intelligence over foolishness, just like darkness over light. Like this is a grace hamsa, that Chachma is better than Sichlus, and he has to bring a mashal, like oil from darkness. And the explanation is given to this, to answer this question. When the pasuk says that I see the virtue of intelligence, chachma, from sichlus, just like the virtue of darkness over light, the meaning of that is not darkness over light, but rather darkness from light. And the true virtue of darkness is when it emerges from the true virtue of light is when it emerges from the darkness, and so too the true virtue of chachma is when it emerges from the sichlus. This is by refining and elevating the darkness that brings out the greatest light. That is is true of the first half of the pasuk, which is the analog of wisdom coming from sichlus. That dafka, when chachma comes from a place of sichlus, then there's a true virtue of chachma. Okay, so what's pshat sichlus? What is the meaning of foolishness here? Sichlus. It's impossible. We cannot say literally that intelligence, especially intelligence the pasuk is referring to, which is the intelligence of Torah, Hashem's intelligence, that this is the virtue of intelligence is that it comes from mamish silliness. That can't be the case. Because the pasuk is not teaching us anything of note to tell us that there's a virtue of chachma over mamish little foolishness. Even if it's coming from foolishness, it's not like there's nothing added here. by saying that this intelligence comes from some silliness. The intention here is the kind of sichlus that's not inherently foolish, but relative to the chachma of kedusha, it's considered foolish. As explained further in the Maamer, the Rabbi is referring to ayin beis here, hemshech ayin beis. Shesichlus, the meaning here of sichlus is chachmos chitzonis. Secular studies. That's what the Gemara is. That's what the pasuk is referring to here. So the virtue of chachma coming from secular studies, from chachma chitzonis. The nikar sichlus. Why is it called sichlus then? So the reason why it's called sichlus is not because it's silly. It's not. Chachma sateva. It's not silly. Chachma sabriya, if you want to use godly terminology, also. So it's not silly. So why is it called sichlus? So explains. It's known. What's the difference between chachma of kedusha and chachma of klipa? Secular studies. The chachma of kedusha is bittul. Chachma of kedusha is bittul. The chachma of klipa is tachlis hayeshes. And chachma of klipa is absolute yeshes. Why? The kivin chachma of klipa mevili the yeshes v'chol gei sheita lefeichach nikra b'shem sichlus. Chachma of klipa brings further arrogance, and arrogance equals foolishness, and therefore this chachma is called sichlus. So it's not called sichlus because inherently there's anything silly about this ideas. The ideas can be very rich, very deep, very nuanced, and all the rest of it. What makes it, or put it a different way, the virtue in terms of seichel, or even in terms of the etzem of what chachma is beyond the chachma of kedusha, chachma Torah, beyond secular studies, is that Torah brings bittul.
So we're going on the person or the seichel itself, subject or the person.
What do you think the pshat is?
The person, Mustama, no?
It looks like, right?
Right, because you can have the Rambam learning chachmas.
No, it's like yeah, which is again with that fresh name pshat. What is this? Meaning, it's almost as if they were saying that the virtue is not that this is going to be more intelligent than the other, but this is bittul, and that's what makes it more virtuous. Efshir we can say like this. I have to look at the Maamer ayin beis, but Efshir can say like this: Chalal intelligence is supposed to be bittul. In theory, if a guy writes a paper discovering something, and then he finds out that somebody else discovered it before him, someone else writes a counter paper discrediting what he wrote. So in theory, he should be very happy because now he found the truth. Before he saw something wrong, and now he found out something's true. Not the nature. The nature is the person's upset that his theory was disproven. Why? If it's all about the seichel, if it's all about the pursuit of truth, the pursuit of science, then what are you getting all upset for? Not the nature of the mitzias. You get upset.
I mean, I'm sure there's like quote unquote Yechidei Sgula, for example, like Einstein comes to mind, or he seemed like a very humble guy. You know, I don't know in Indian, but I'm sure there were greats that study this to really study it, and they were humbled by the seichel in a way.
Yeah, and in fact, there's people who learn Torah and they're arrogant.
Right.
So what's pshat? So what is a pshat? So l'chor, you have to go back to the seichel. It's true. Someone could be batel when learning chachmas chitzonos, and also a person could be arrogant when he's learning Torah. And Taka, the Alter writes in Tanya that a person learns Torah with arrogance. He has to do tshuva because he brought in a klipa into his learning, right? He brought a klipa into his learning by being arrogant over his learning. That's not the writes in Tanya. He has to do tshuva for his learning. So what's Taka pshat? So the pshat is the seichel alein, the seichel itself. What does it draw out from the person? The person can be one way or the other, but the seichel itself, because the seichel of Torah is the seichel of Lakos, that the more a person understands, the more it demands of the person that he be bottled to the ideas that he's learning. When it comes to secular studies, the better a person does, because it's not about the truth of Lakos, it's about the discovery of what is. Then the more true and right I have more reason to be arrogant. So in other words, that guy who the paper He wrote a paper and somebody else disproved him. Yeah. So what happens if he then writes a counter paper and substantiates his claim? So he has now the right to be more arrogant. The seichel itself tells him, good, you got it right. You're closer to the truth. Stand on your high horse. Be the greater one. In other words, the reason why he shouldn't have been upset the first time is because he shouldn't have been upset when he was disproven, or let's say he's a bottle to a guy who's not disproven, is because he's looking out for the truth. Okay, so now you found the truth. Let's say you resolve the issue and you now prove that you were right. So the seichel itself says, good, you have right to be arrogant. But when it comes to seichel of Torah, the more the person's right in seichel of Torah, the more the seichel of Torah itself is that he should be bottle. What does the seichel tell you to do? What does the seichel demand of you? So the more you get chassidus right, it's not that, okay, I got it right, so nobody else can disprove me, so now I can be more arrogant about what I know. It's the opposite of everything you know. It's true, you could be arrogant because you're the human being with the nefesh Bahamas, and it's not impossible that a person could be arrogant from learning Torah, even from learning chassidus. But the chassidus itself he's learning doesn't ask him to be arrogant, it asks him to be bottle. So now we're back to the seichel. It's not just the person. It's what does the seichel demand of the person? What does the seichel want of the person? What does the seichel tell the person? And the seichel of Torah, the seichel of Kedusha tells you bittul, which means there's an element of the seichel itself which is more true, considering that it asks the person to be bittul. Because in reality, all seichel should demand bittul. Really, if it's pure seichel and it's pure abstraction, it should require bittul of the person. But the mitzias is that the seichel of klipa doesn't demand out of the reader. If the person gets it right, taste this. The bittul of that's demanded in Chachmas Chetzenis is only because you got it wrong, not because you got it right. Whereas in Kedusha, the more right you get it, the more bittul the seichel itself requires mourning. I don't know. Okay. Okay, so now it comes like this. So now, based on the pasuk, Yisro Chachma Sichlus, we're from the Sichlus itself used to come to the Chachma, just like from the Chayshech, you come to the Or, just from the darkness, you come to the light. That's the greater light. So from the Sichlus, you come to the greater Chachma of Kedusha. And that's why Yisro has to show up on the scene. Which means then, the Mivarer Chachma of Klipa first, and then comes Matan Torah. She explains, by refining the sichlos, which is chachma of klipa. The kedusha, there's a virtue, there's an added element to the chachma of kedusha. Kedusha itself gains by the fact that someone came from the world of chachma chitzonis. There's a Yisro in there. Okay, hopefully we'll explain a little bit in a moment what that means. Let's finish the ois here, the paragraph. This is the meaning of Yisro's admission where he says, now I know, etc. Now I know that God is greater than all gods, etc. And therefore he's coming. As Rashi points out, right? Yisro says, now I know that God is greater than all other gods, meaning he had interaction and knowledge of all other gods. So he was engaged in all of it as this world had to offer, and still comes and says, now I know that Hashem is greater than all. So this idea of his involvement in all of it that the world has, this is the idea of Chachma of Klipa. So that is, he had full knowledge of all sciences, all intelligences and intellectual pursuits of this world. And from there he's coming to Torah. And through his admission, coming from that world, there's an added virtue into the Chachma of Kedusha, but not the Chachma of Kedusha in the sense that now there's greater intelligence to Torah, but of Kedusha. The light of Kedusha is on a greater level, considering that it comes from the darkness. The darkness of the arrogance of Klippa of Chachma Chetzonis. Okay, based on this we can understand, we can explain. Now we know why Dafka required Yisro's admission before we can get the revelation of Matan Torah. Because again, back to the Rabbi Chiddush here, this Maimon, what's the idea of the revelation of Matan Torah? We're talking about the level of God that's beyond even revelation. The level of the Eibishter, the essence of Hashem himself, Atzmas Samos, that's beyond even revelation of transcendent or infinite. The one who dwells in darkness secrets. This is the virtue of the Yisro. So it says, Torah on its own before Yisro arrives is Or. It's the highest level of Or. It's Or Ein Sof. The greatest levels of revelation is expressed in Torah before Yisro arrives. Now with Yisro's arrival, there's a Yisro. There's an added virtue added to this transcendent light. And what's the added virtue? L'mayla den ketz. Then now even the level which is beyond revelation is now expressed in this Or. So the Chochmah of Seichel of Torah remains Or Ein Sof, but there's an added virtue which is given to the Or, which is this Yashas Cheshach Sisra, the essence of Hashem, which transcends even the Or Ein Sof. The Gilui Pchenezu, and to access and to reveal this level, Nasa Dafka Idei Birur HaChoshen. It says Dafka by refining the darkness. This is the meaning of the second half of the pasuk, that there's a virtue of light that comes from the darkness. The virtue of, there's a new pshat here. The simple pshat in Yisro is that the virtue of light is that it comes from the darkness, from the negativity. Here he's saying like this: Yisro, what's the virtue of light? The virtue itself comes from the darkness which precedes that light. So the darkness from the light is not the pshat that the light gets greater. Usually it says that's the pshat, that the light gets more brilliant because it came from a place of darkness. Here he's saying the Yisro, what is the virtue added to light? Min HaChoshech comes from that darkness which is beyond light.
So the Maila here is the Cheshach component, basically.
Correct. The Cheshach is the Maila. And that's the virtue that's given to Or. The Yisro of Or is the Cheshach. The virtue added to light here is the darkness which precedes the light. Not the darkness that all comes from, the birur, the refinement of the darkness that comes lower than the light. Now, when the light comes from the darkness, literally from the negativity, that the negativity itself, the darkness itself transforms into light, then the Or itself gets this added virtue. What's the virtue? That he'll draw upon the darkness, that comes from Hashem's essence, it's beyond the light. Okay, what's pshat in this paragraph? So what did he say? He said that the same way you refine darkness, you then get to the darkness that precedes the light, the essence of Hashem, which transcends light, transcends Or Ein Sof. So too, when a person is mevarer, the Chachma Chetzonis, whose problem is not intelligence, the problem is bittul, is arrogance, and you mevarer that seichel, then it adds to the virtue of Torah, that Torah now also has this element of Yashas Cheshach Sisra, that it has Hashem's very essence that's beyond light. That's what he said. So what's the pshat here? So why? I mean, this is the theme running through the Maimre, but just through the Hemshech, but just to unpack a little bit. Why is it that Dafka, the Bir HaChoshech, brings the Choshech of Yashas Cheshach Sisra, which is beyond the light? It's like Zera Shava. because they're both called Choshech. One's called darkness because Or Ein Sof is missing, and one's called darkness because it's beyond Or Ein Sof. Therefore, one draws upon the other. What's the Gzeir Shava? Because here is Choshech. So if you mevarer the Choshech of negativity, therefore you get the Choshech that transcends the light. Yeah. Now, but then the beer is based on everything he said before in the previous Maamrim, that what's revealed in the fact that we're talking about Yashas Cheshach Sisra, what's revealed in the fact that what we're drawing upon is what's revealed in this idea of tzimtzum shalafnei tzimtzum addition. What's revealed in the fact that in order for the Or Ein Sof itself to be, there's a requirement of its tzimtzum. What's revealed is that everything that exists, whether it's the greatest transcendence or the greatest darkness, is all by God's choice. That's what's revealed. That even Or Ein Sof, why does it have to be a tzimtzum lafnei tzimtzum addition? What's the hesber, the tzimtzum lafnei tzimtzum addition? Because anything that exists, because it exists by virtue of choice, Hashem decides there should be an Or and Sof. Hashem decides that the Or should be called B'mor. Hashem decides that there should be a Mor. Hashem decides that there should be a Yechilas. So as soon as you say Hashem decides to do something, because again, God's not compelled by anything, not even by the notion of Or and Sof. So Hashem is deciding to manifest Or and Sof, and that decision itself is a tzimtzum. Because you're discriminating between one thing and another. You're choosing one or the other. That's already a tzimtzum. This yes, that no. Now, where is this choice expressed most? This is all based on the priest Mamorim, which I'm sure you've heard from the Rabbi already. But what expresses this choice? Where is this choice expressed? It's expressed in an area where actually there's less Or. When there's more Or, when what's dominant is the expressed manifestation of Eibishter's, the greatest virtue in and of itself, is the Yisro, right? The Or has got great value. So if that's where you start, then purpose is in what has greater value. What has greater value? And greater value is closer to Eibishter. That's what's greater value. But once it comes from choice, then it's not a question of who has greater value inherently. The whole value is only because I chose it. Only because I chose it. So, and therefore, it's dafka when Oyer and Sof is able to be mevarer a choshech. That's when Oyer and Sof demonstrates that its whole existence is Hashem's choice. Because without Hashem's choice, so to speak, if Oyer and Sof was a virtue in and of itself, why would it ever bother with choshech? Why would it ever bother with choshech? There's only if we're stuck in the hierarchies of what's closer to godliness and what's farther than godliness, and if you're at the height of godliness, then what are you busying with choshech for? Ignore the whole thing. You're Oyer and Sof, you're beyond everything. You're infinite. You're perfect, highest virtue possible. Why are you investing in anything that's not perfect virtue? The only reason to invest yourself in something which is highest virtue, the only reason to invest yourself in something which is opposite to all the virtues you stand for, is it because the one that chose your virtue said so. So now what's added in the Or itself, right? It doesn't say here that we're ignoring the Or in favor of the choshech that comes before, but the Or itself gets this new Yisro in all of that which is beyond. Meaning the Or remains Or, but now what's added here is that the virtue of you Or is because Hashem chose it, tzimtzum. And this virtue, this truth, that the value of Or and Sof is because Hashem chose the Or and Sof is expressed, dafka when Or and Sof does that which is quote unquote unnatural to it. When Or and Sof does something unnatural, and that it goes to mevarer the choshech, which is unnatural to Or, it shouldn't be mevarer anything, it's Or. But the Or and Sof is mevarer choshech, and that's something that's unnatural to it, that demonstrates and reveals that Or itself is because you, Hashem, chose it. Yoshesh choshech sisrei. Which means now it comes a funny thing, a logistical paradoxical thing. Again, if this pshat is correct. The value of Chachma de Kedusha over Chachma de Klippa, he said, is Chachma de Kedusha is bittul. And Chachma de Klippa is arrogance. Now, when Chachma de Kedusha is mevarer Chachma of Klippa, ironically, that's the greatest bittul of Chachma of Kedusha. You, Chachma of Kedusha, are bittul to Hashem. What does Hashem want? Hashem wants you to go into something which is uncomfortable to you, unnatural to you, to mevarer Chachma of Klippa into that place of arrogance. And that's going to be the greatest bittul of yours. By the seichel of Kedusha, by Chachma of Kedusha, being mevarer, that which is Chachma of Klippa, that which is Chachma of arrogance, that in itself brings out the greatest bittul in Or and Sof Gufa, that in itself is only a choice of Yoshesh choshech sisrei. This comes out l'chora pshat in this whole business. L'chora.
So it's like the atzmistic component now is coming out because of this, the relationship it has with choshech, or in this case of the seichel, with opposite of bittul.
Correct. By going to a place that's opposite. In other words, its nature is, so to speak, to yibotl. That's the nature of Or and Sof, to yibotl. But what's the virtue of that nature to be yibotl? Because it inherently has a virtue. That's ironically a sort of level of arrogance. when it goes against its grain by going to the seichel of klipa, which is opposite to its nature, which is even greater bittul than the bittul it had before. The bittul it had before, it was mevarer seichel of klipa. That's its natural state of bittul. That's its toyar. That's the language that everybody's been using. The toyar of Ein Sof is to be infinite bittul. Yeah, but now it's going to be an unnatural bittul when it goes to a place of arrogance. And that's going to bring out the true value here, that its whole value of its bittul of Eretz, because the Rebbe chose it, the Yoshes Choshech Sisser, which is beyond Earth, chose this value. That's only expressed once it goes to the unnatural zone, which is to go to Seichel of Klippa. What's left to be explained a little bit is what exactly does it mean to be Mevarer Seichel of Klippa? Doesn't really explain what that means. And l'chura, what it means is hagufas, to bring that bittul. Because again, we're not talking about sichlo stam, and even the avodah zarah that he's talking about here is that he knew all chachmas chitzonis, right? That was the word there. And the problem with seichel of chachma of klippa is not the intelligence shaboy, it's the arrogance that's in that intelligence, which means like Torah has to bring a level of bittul to the study of science. That when a person is studying sciences and studying the world at large, he should see the Eibishter there and not see his discovery. See Eibishter. That's the bitter here, right? But it's still an unnatural place for seichel of kedusha. Seichel of kedusha is only in the discovery of Eibishter, not the discovery of that which is not Eibishter and then find Eibishter in it. But haguf is the bitter. To go to a place of seichel which is klipa that has arrogance and to say no, there too is Eibishter. This is all Eibishter seichel. I don't know, this is Efshek Zagan maybe. And with this Akdama, the next paragraph, which also is a big chiddush of this Maimer, the next paragraph, this last paragraph is largely in Ayin Beis. The next paragraph is going to be much more of a chiddush in this Maimer. And I think what we explained here will help us understand what he explains in the next paragraph. Have a good day, Eden.